Have you ever met someone whose presence felt like a question you've been avoiding your whole life? Someone who didn't just enter your space, but quietly slipped into the silent corners of your awareness, as if they were not a stranger, but a memory returning in human form. Why is it that in a world full of noise, a single unfamiliar soul can stir a feeling so ancient that you cannot explain it with logic? And what does it mean when your mind hesitates, but your spirit leans forward, whispering, "You've seen this essence before"? We often claim that awakening is a solitary path, a private journey through thoughts, wounds, and layers of ego we must peel back alone. But then, once in a great while, something unexpected happens. You meet someone whose inner world feels like a mirror of your own, someone who carries the same quiet ache for meaning, the same fatigue of pretending, the same hunger for truth. And suddenly you find yourself wondering, what happens when two souls who have stepped beyond their illusions finally meet each other on the other side? There's a strange pull that accompanies such a meeting, not loud like desire, not chaotic like attraction, but gentle, steady, like gravity. You try to rationalize it, to categorize it, to convince yourself that it's coincidence or imagination, but your spirit knows. There is a recognition deeper than the mind's explanations, a resonance that hums beneath your thoughts. Why does it feel like this person sees something in you that most people walk right past? Why do they make you feel transparent, not in a way that exposes, but in a way that liberates? And why does their presence awaken questions you thought you had buried? Have I known you before? Or have I simply known myself so deeply that I can finally recognize someone who mirrors the same awareness? In these rare encounters, something profound begins to unfold. Not romantically, not dramatically, but energetically. The ego, which usually rushes to protect, suddenly steps aside. The mind, which usually fills silence with explanations, becomes quiet. And the heart, which often hides behind complexity, softens into simplicity. But why? What is it about awakened beings that makes them intuitively sense each other beneath the layers of personality and performance? Is it the way they carry their peace, the way they move through life with a certain softness, a certain clarity? Or is it because awakened souls speak the same language without ever opening their mouths? Perhaps the real question is not what happens when such beings meet, but why it affects us so deeply. Why does a single moment of true recognition feel like sunlight reaching a part of you that has been dark for years? Why does it feel like someone has found you without you ever needing to be found? And why does this encounter stir a fear as subtle as it is sacred? The fear that once you've tasted this level of connection, anything less will no longer feel alive. This is where the story begins, with a meeting that feels accidental on the surface, yet inevitable to the soul beneath it. Number one, the energetic shift. There is an almost imperceptible moment, subtle as a breath, soft as a thought, when two awakened beings sense each other before a single word is spoken. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need permission. It simply arrives, like a quiet current beneath the surface of ordinary interaction. And perhaps you felt it too, that shift in the air when someone's presence reaches you, not through the ears, not through the eyes, but through a more ancient doorway inside your being. What is that feeling? Why does it happen? And why does it seem to bypass everything the mind has been trained to analyze? When two spiritually awakened beings meet, the energy between them behaves differently. It moves differently. It listens differently. Instead of colliding, it aligns. Instead of demanding attention, it invites awareness. A subtle softening occurs. Not because the other person is perfect, but because they are present, truly present. There is a quality in their existence that communicates without speaking. I am here with myself, therefore I can be here with you. And that alone can be disarming, because most people come wrapped in layers of noise, distraction, and unconscious defense. But an awakened being arrives uncluttered. They arrive as themselves. You might notice that your breath deepens around them. You might become unusually aware of your own thoughts, not because you're self-conscious, but because their presence reminds you to observe yourself gently. It's as if their awareness activates your awareness, like two tuning forks vibrating in harmony without ever touching. Why does this happen? Maybe because awakened souls vibrate at a frequency the mind cannot counterfeit, a frequency of honesty, humility, and inner clarity. When two such frequencies meet, they don't overpower each other, they synchronize. It's not chemistry, it's not attraction, it's recognition. And recognition creates safety, the rare kind that doesn't need to be negotiated. Suddenly, the ego loosens its grip. The need to perform dissolves. The subtle tension that usually coils itself in your shoulders begins to unwind. You don't feel the urge to be impressive or guarded or interesting. You feel allowed. And that permission does something profound. It lets your deeper truth rise to the surface slowly and peacefully, like a lotus opening in warm water. There is nothing loud or dramatic about this energetic shift, yet it can feel more intimate than any confession. Because the moment someone sees you as you are, without agenda, without judgment, without expectation, something within you exhales that hasn't exhaled in years. And in this quiet, energetic exchange, the soul whispers what the mouth cannot articulate. I recognize your depth. I recognize your clarity. I recognize the journey behind your eyes. This shift is sacred not because it is rare, but because it is real. It is the meeting of two individuals who have stopped running from themselves and therefore no longer need to run from each other. And in that simplicity, something extraordinary unfolds. You feel at home in the presence of someone you've just met, and strangely unfamiliar in the life you return to afterward. Number 2, the mirror effect there is a peculiar, almost mystical phenomenon that unfolds when two spiritually awakened beings stand before each other. They do not merely meet, they mirror. Not the shallow reflection of appearance or personality, but the deeper reflection of truth, the one most people spend their whole lives avoiding. And perhaps that is why such encounters feel both comforting and unsettling at the same time. Have you ever wondered why someone's presence can make you feel beautifully understood yet strangely exposed, as if they are gently holding up a mirror you didn't ask for but desperately needed? What is it about awakened beings that turns their interactions into silent revelations? The mirror effect begins with awareness. Awakened souls have done the uncomfortable inner work of seeing themselves without flinching. Their patterns, their wounds, their illusions, their beauty. They have walked through their own darkness long enough to stop fearing shadows. So when they meet someone who has journeyed through similar landscapes, the recognition is immediate. You know the terrain I've crossed because you've crossed your own. There is no need to pretend, no need to perform, no need to polish the edges. The connection becomes raw in the most peaceful way. Yet this mirror is not always gentle. It reflects with honesty. If you've been hiding from a feeling, they sense it. If you've been carrying a quiet sadness, they notice it. Not because they're analyzing you, but because they understand the subtle languages of emotion that others overlook. They see the truth you carry, not because they want to expose you, but because they've learned to stop denying their own. And in their presence, you may suddenly feel lighter or heavier, depending on what the mirror reveals. Why does this happen? Because awakened beings are attentive, not just to others, but to themselves. Their clarity becomes a reflective surface. Your sincerity resonates with theirs. Your fears ripple when touched by theirs. The space between you becomes a field of shared awareness. And in that field, masks have nowhere to stand. The ego loses its usual tricks. You cannot hide the parts of yourself you've been avoiding, not because you are being watched, but because you are finally watching yourself through someone else's calm gaze. This mirroring can bring relief. Finally, someone understands without me having to explain. But it can also bring discomfort. Finally, someone sees the truth I've been postponing. Two awakened beings trigger each other in ways that are not destructive, but transformative. They soften each other's defenses simply by existing. They reveal each other's blind spots through presence, not pressure. They awaken each other not with lessons, but with resonance. And perhaps the most profound aspect of this mirror effect is this: the clearer the reflection, the deeper the connection. When someone reflects your truth without distortion, something ancient inside you relaxes, and something hidden rises to the surface, asking to be healed. This is the silent gift awakened beings give each other, not answers, not solutions, but clarity. A clarity that doesn't tell you who you should be, only who you already are, beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the story you've outgrown. Number 3, silence, understanding, presence. There is a kind of silence that only is in the presence of a soul who understands you. Not the silence of awkwardness, not the silence that begs to be filled, but the silence that feels like a warm doorway into something deeper. When two spiritually awakened beings meet, this silence becomes the language through which everything essential is said. Have you ever noticed how rare it is to sit beside someone without feeling the pressure to speak, to impress, or to entertain? Why does the world make us believe that connection requires constant conversation, when some of the most profound connections happen in the quiet space between breaths? Awakened beings recognize each other through presence, not performance. Their energy doesn't rush, doesn't grasp, doesn't demand. It simply is. And that calmness creates a sanctuary where silence can breathe. In this silence, you feel seen without being scrutinized, understood without being analyzed. You begin to realize that most of your life has been spent in noise, the noise of expectations, judgments, insecurities, and unspoken fears. And suddenly, in the presence of someone who has touched their own stillness, you are reminded of your own. Words become secondary, not because there is nothing to say, but because the essence of what needs to be communicated does not rely on language. Presence speaks through the subtle, the softness of their gaze, the steadiness of their breathing, the groundedness of their posture. These are the quiet signals of someone who lives with awareness rather than avoidance. And in their company, your own awareness awakens. You begin to notice the rhythm of your heartbeat, the weight of your thoughts, the lightness in your chest that appears when you stop trying to be anything other than yourself. Why does silence feel safer between awakened beings? Perhaps because neither is trying to escape themselves. When you are comfortable with your inner world, you naturally become comfortable in the inner world of another. There is no need to fill the emptiness because there is no emptiness, only presence. And presence is enough. In fact, presence is everything. In this mutual stillness, understanding arises effortlessly. You feel understood not through stories, but through essence. You don't have to explain your past traumas, your quiet anxieties, or the thoughts that follow you through lonely nights. Somehow, they already sense the weight you carry, not through psychic ability, but through empathy earned from their own healing. Their silence is not indifferent. It is honoring. It is listening in a way words cannot. This presence becomes a bridge between two inner worlds, a bridge built not on shared experiences, but on shared awareness. And across this bridge flows something rare: acceptance without conditions, connection without roles, being without expectation. For a moment, you glimpse what human connection is meant to feel like when stripped of ego and noise, peaceful, transparent, and deeply alive. And perhaps the greatest paradox of all is this: in the quietest moments between two awakened beings, you often hear the loudest truths. Number 4, The challenges of spiritual resonance, for all their harmony, the meeting of two spiritually awakened beings is not without its shadows. In fact, it is often within these rare connections that the deepest challenges quietly emerge. People imagine awakened souls merging effortlessly, as if enlightenment were a permanent state of grace. But awakening doesn't erase the human experience. It only illuminates it. And when two beings who see themselves clearly stand before each other, the light they share can reveal the final layers of ego each still carries. Have you ever wondered why the people who feel the most familiar can also make you feel the most vulnerable? Why a soul who understands you can also awaken the fears you thought you outgrew? Spiritual resonance creates a powerful intimacy, one that can stir emotions long buried beneath years of self-control and emotional independence. When you meet someone who feels like an energetic equal, your internal walls, the ones built from years of self-protection, begin to loosen. And that loosening can be unsettling, because the ego, even after awakening, still tries to guard its last strongholds. It whispers, "Don't get too close. What if this depth disappears? What if you lose yourself?" The irony is that the ego fears precisely what the soul longs for: transparency, depth, truth. Awakened beings may feel deeply connected, yet their past wounds still echo quietly within them. These echoes can clash. One may fear being seen too fully, the other may fear being misunderstood. One may retreat into solitude to regulate their energy. The other may interpret that retreat as emotional distance. Even the smallest actions can feel magnified in spiritually resonant connections, because both individuals are finely attuned to subtle shifts. This sensitivity is beautiful, but it can also make the connection feel intense, overwhelming, or unstable at times. There is also the challenge of reflection. When someone mirrors your truth with clarity, they reflect not only your light, but your shadows. They don't do it intentionally. It happens naturally through presence alone. You may find yourself confronting emotions you believe were resolved. Old fears may resurface. Insecurities you've skillfully managed may suddenly come alive again. Am I enough? Can I trust this? What if I lose this connection? What if I lose myself in it? The mind tries to control what the soul naturally wants to experience, and that internal tension can create confusion, even in the most awakened hearts. And yet, these challenges are not obstacles. They are invitations. Invitations to shed the last remaining fragments of ego that cling to attachment, fear, or identity. Invitations to communicate with clarity rather than assumption. Invitations to practice presence not just in solitude, but in connection. Two awakened beings do not challenge each other to break one another. They challenge each other to break open, to expand, to soften, to deepen into the truth they've already glimpsed within themselves. In this way, the difficulties that arise in spiritually resonant connections are not signs of incompatibility, but signs of growth. The connection itself becomes a teacher, revealing what is unhealed, illuminating what is unloved, and encouraging both souls to rise gently into the next layer of their awakening. Number 5, the union of awareness. There comes a moment, quiet, unannounced, and almost accidental, when the meeting between two spiritually awakened beings deepens into something beyond emotion, beyond intellect, beyond the familiar rhythms of ordinary human connection. It is not romance, though it may feel intimate. It is not friendship, though it may feel close. It is the union of awareness, a merging not of selves, but of presence. And this union carries a quality that is difficult to name, yet impossible to ignore. Have you ever felt a connection that seemed to arise from a place older than memory? A resonance that didn't ask for anything, didn't cling to anything, didn't need anything, yet felt profoundly whole? What happens inside us when we meet someone who stands at the same depth of consciousness, where silence, honesty, and truth converge effortlessly? In this union, the usual markers of connection fade. There is no negotiation of roles, no subtle competition of egos, no search for validation. Instead, there is a gentle alignment, two beings sharing the same inner altitude. Their awareness does not merge in a way that dissolves individuality. Rather, it creates a space where individuality is honored without attachment. The presence of the other becomes a reminder, a reflection, a subtle encouragement to remain awake. You begin to feel that you are not walking beside them, nor behind them, nor ahead of them, but with them on the same wavelength of consciousness, each movement of awareness naturally echoing in the other. This union feels like standing in a field where the wind moves through both spirits at once, where the ground beneath both sets of feet carries the same. Stillness, where every moment feels like an invitation to exist without pretending. You sense that you are meeting not the person, but the consciousness behind the person, the awareness observing their thoughts, the presence beneath their identity, the stillness behind their emotions. And in that recognition, something ancient awakens inside you. The understanding that connection does not need intensity, it needs clarity, it does not require possession. It requires presence. Yet the beauty of this union lies in its fragility. Not the fragility of weakness, but the fragility of truth. Awareness cannot be forced, controlled, or packaged into permanence. It must be met with openness, tended with gentleness, honored with honesty. The union of awareness is not a bond you hold on to. It is a space you return to. It thrives not on expectations, but on mutual presence. And for two awakened beings, this presence becomes a kind of wordless promise. I will meet you where you are, without masks, without stories, without fear. Depth of connection reshapes the inner world. You begin to see your own consciousness more clearly, reflected through the other's stillness. You realize that awakening is not simply an individual journey. It is also relational. Awareness expands when shared. Insights deepen when mirrored. Healing accelerates when held in a field of mutual understanding. Two awakened beings do not complete each other. They awaken each other further. And perhaps this is the quiet magic of such a union. It reminds you that the most profound connections are not those that bind, but those that liberate. Those that echo your presence, not your past. Those that encourage you to keep awakening again and again, each time with more softness, more clarity, and more truth. In the end, the meeting of two spiritually awakened beings is not a story of destiny or romance or cosmic coincidence. It is a gentle reminder of what it means to be truly human. It is the universe holding. Up a mirror through another soul, whispering, this is what connection feels like when fear steps aside. And perhaps you have felt this too. That subtle shift when someone enters your life not to complete you, not to fix you, not to rescue you, but simply to recognize you. Why does such recognition feel so rare? Why does it linger in the mind long after the moment has passed? And why does it awaken a longing you didn't know you carried? A longing not for another person, but for the version of yourself that emerges in their presence. The truth is, spiritually awakened connections are not about possession or permanence. They do not promise forever. They do not follow the scripts of ordinary relationships. They arrive quietly, change you subtly, and leave you with a deeper understanding of yourself. These encounters are teachers disguised as people. They reveal the landscapes within you that you have forgotten to explore. They show you the parts of yourself that are still waiting to be held, healed, or understood. They invite you into a deeper intimacy with your own consciousness. And yet such meetings are often temporary, not because something went wrong, but because awakening itself is fluid. Two souls may meet at the perfect moment, at matching depths, in shared clarity, only to drift apart when their paths call them toward different lessons. This impermanence is not a failure, it is a gift. Some connections are meant to open a door within you, not to walk through it with you. Some people enter your life to expand your awareness, not to occupy your future. And once you understand this, you begin to appreciate the encounter, not for its duration, but for its impact. If you have ever crossed paths with a soul who mirrored your depth, who softened your fears, who reminded you to breathe. You have experienced something sacred, something the mind may try to label, define, or cling to, but something the heart knows cannot be owned. What awakened beings teach each. Other is not attachment, but presence, not desire, but awareness, not certainty, but acceptance. Their connection is a moment of clarity in the river of experience, a still point where truth rises to the surface. So as you reflect on such meetings, perhaps the real question is not why didn't it last, but how did it change me? Did it make you softer? Did it make you stronger? Did it strip away another layer of illusion you were unconsciously holding on to? Did it remind you that you are capable of recognizing truth even in another's eyes? These encounters, rare as they are, mark the soul. They leave behind a quiet echo that lingers long after the other person is gone. And if you listen closely, that echo becomes a guide, calling you back to yourself, to your awareness, to your depth. The meeting may end, but the awakening it sparked continues. And maybe that is the real purpose of two spiritually awakened beings crossing paths, not to build a shared life, but to awaken a shared truth.